today. We're going to talk about a little bit, very short stream on why sparring definitely is not a real fight. And I know you have doghouse rules, you have people who work on different stuff, you got light sparring, you got heavy sparring, etc., etc., etc. We know about that. But even, the what we call the sparring wars, they're still not symptomatic of real fights. They're not a real professional fights, and we're going to go into that in some detail. So, what I'm going to do is direct my attention to YouTube here, and I'm going to talk about one person first. And now, the stuff that I'm going to cover is stuff people don't really talk about too much. They talk about, different size gloves, so therefore your defense is a little bit different because you have headgear, sometimes in sparring. So all of those things kind of add up. Sometimes there's no headgear, depending on what this kind of sparring you're doing. Doing doghouse rules, may have bigger gloves, but it might be just to the finish. But even so, all those sparring sessions, fighters these days like to brag about this, Tank, they put out something on Devin Haney versus Tank recently. They put out Rolly Romero getting dropped in sparring. We've seen different people get dropped in sparring and stuff like that, and Teofimo Lopez get dropped in sparring. But you have to understand that's sparring. So, okay, let's get this out of the way before I get into what I really want to say. Vince Phillips sparring, right? Let me show you. This is Vince Phillips versus Miga Cotto here. I want to bring in the noise on that. Okay, this is Vince Phillips versus Miga Cotto, and they're sparring away. All right, shout out to Chain Equip 30 Sport for covering this. Okay, so here they are sparring away. Vince Phillips was repeatedly in sparring wars, beaten up. Another guy who's beaten up in sparring a lot was Sergey Kovalev. But there are two very important things for people to understand. A lot of times, fresh new fighters are coming back to spar the guy. First of all, it depends on the conditioning of the fighter, meaning where they are in their training sessions, if they have a fight in front of them. Two, it also depends on the fact that what's the shape of the fighter. And then you may have multiple people sparring the fighter in any given session, right? So it's, 5 rounds to this guy, 5 rounds to another guy, 5 rounds to another guy, and so on. Okay? So this is Vince versus Cotto. I believe the guy with the blue headgear is Cotto. The guy with the red headgear is Vince Phillips. Yeah, I believe that's the case. All right. Now, anyway, the point I'm making is that this is sparring. I don't think they're going all the way out here in this sparring. That's sparring. Now, the thing with sparring, there's a couple things about sparring. Even if you're doing doghouse rules and you're going all out, you got to remember the conditioning of the boxers is not necessarily tip-top. Think about this. Sparring, maybe a couple of days, hey, I'm going to go spar this guy. Or sometimes it's impromptu. That means nobody really has prep time. It's not like if you're doing an actual professional fight where you have days or months to be able to prepare for a certain fighter. So your focus is solely that fighter. Sparring usually happens where maybe on a certain day you're going to spar this guy. Or it may be that you're just sparring a whole bunch of different people. Maybe this is your day to spar and you spar 2-3 different people while you're sparring. You know what I'm saying? So sparring doesn't really have any set times, and there's no special prep for sparring. Whereas with a real fight, a professional fight where you're paid, when there's smaller gloves, where the stakes are higher, where everybody should be coming in properly conditioned, and usually have ample time to prepare for a fight, or maybe 3 months, whatever. It's just a different cup of tea. And so that's why I have Vince Phillips here facing Costa Tszyu in my title, just right here. And I just want to give you highlights of that, because Vince Phillips was the first guy to beat Costa Tszyu. This is the fight. This is the fight right here. And Vince Phillips is not as precise as Costa Tszyu, but he really throws that right hand off the weak side of Costa Tszyu. Now, the other thing about Vince Phillips was he really fought. He mostly fought at welterweight. He was a big light welterweight. So that's another thing to remember. But yeah, Vince Phillips beat Costa Tszyu. Right. But he's a guy that repeatedly got beat up in sparring. Here's what it is. So why am I speaking about this? Why am I speaking about sparring being different from actual fighting? It's because sparring is not something that happens, it's something where you have this anticipated sparring of this anticipated opponent over months or weeks, like an actual fight. The preparation for a fight, because preparation is key for everything. So when people talk about like Gervonta Davis jumping off a plane and going on sparring Devin Haney, and he wasn't in the greatest condition in the world, that would never happen in a real fight. In a real professional boxing fight, that would never happen. He'd at least have, like Costa Tszyu, at least 12 days or a couple of days, So that's something that you guys have to bear in mind. The preparation for a real fight is different to sparring, and that's my major point I wanted to point out. It's different. Now, there's many, many things about sparring that's different to if you're fighting a real fight. But that's one of the things I notice a lot of people don't talk about, that your focus is really on this particular opponent. It's not on several different people and you just so happen to fight this guy, So that's what I've got for you guys. There's much more to it than that, but that's where we'll stop for now. I'm WattUNeed. Peace. Don't forget you can donate via PayPal. The link is in the description. All right.